thanks for the song, David. That was another one that was new to me. I'm always amazed. So thank you for choosing to be part of this spiritual community this week. Whether you're new, relatively new, or have been with us for many years, we're glad you are here today. I want to start with a quote from the Tao Te Ching, Stephen Mitchell's translation. It's number 78. Nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water. Yet for dissolving the hard and inflexible, nothing can surpass it. The soft overcomes the hard. The gentle overcomes the rigid. Everyone knows this is true, but few can put it in practice. Therefore, the master remains serene in the midst of sorrow. Evil cannot enter his heart. Because he has given up helping, and I translate that as struggling and striving, he is people's greatest help. True words seem paradoxical. The novelist Ursula Le Guin also made a version of the Tao Te Ching, and in her reading, everybody knows it, but nobody can use this knowledge. So here we are at the paradox, fighting what we don't want, or fighting against what we don't want. Seems like the way the world works, right? But how useful is it? Does that actually work? Does that actually make beneficial change? Is that how change happens? Today we're talking about non-resistance, a difficult idea at best, right? So Derek Rydell, in his book Emergence that Nicole mentioned earlier, has a story at the beginning of chapter 4 that is pretty useful. The wife of a couple is in therapy, and they probably should both be there, but they're not. And they're having hard times. They can't even look at each other without growling. The therapist, being a very wise man, reaches into his desk drawer and pulls out a bottle of holy water, blessed by a Swami in India. He instructs her, for the next week, whenever your husband is about to enter the room, take a drink of this holy water, hold it under your tongue, and look into his eyes. After a few seconds, swallow it. You should notice an improvement in your interactions right away. Well, she's, a little bit not sure, but whatever, right? So she goes home and she waits for her husband to get off work. And when she hears his key in the door, she takes a swig and she holds it under her tongue and she silently holds his gaze. He's puzzled by her behavior because that's quite different for her. And he grins nervously. She swallows the water and asks how his day was. They didn't argue. The same occurrence happened over and over and over for the rest of the day and the rest of the week. And she'd begun to remember and begun to see the man she'd fallen in love with. He responded to her in the ways she wanted him to. The following week, she went back to the therapist. Her water bottle, her holy water bottle, was empty and she needed more because it was working. The therapist listened to her talk. And after she extolled the virtues of this bottle of holy water, he shook his head and he told her there was nothing special about that bottle of water. It was just store-bought water, bottled water. The power that had begun to heal their relationship had been within her and within her husband all along. She just had to let it out. So obviously, relationships are not one-sided, and theirs took a lot more work. But the woman being able to hit the pause button and give up her old story about how inconsiderate or mean or whatever her husband was, and the resistance she had about what she needed him to be. She made space for a different reality, and she allowed the love, respect, and appreciation that already existed in her, within her, to emerge. And it was met by love, respect, and appreciation. On page 78, Derek wrote, just as the seed already contains the pattern for the plant, and the soil it's planted in contains all the nutrients necessary for its growth, the seed planted in our soul contains everything we need to grow. So actualizing our greater potential is not a process of coping, defending, or fighting our way to the next level. It's a process of activating this inherent potential. As individualized expressions of divine love and intelligence, we didn't come here to get anything, but rather to release our imprisoned splendor. We really are God's gift to the world. Living otherwise, striving to get from the world, sets up a belief in lack that we will experience continuously, and it blocks the emergence of the gifts that we each came here to give. So I was looking at something on the computer, and I came across an educational psychologist who I'd never heard of before. His name was Harvey Dorfman. His training was educational psychology. His love was the game of baseball. Somewhere along the line, he realized that baseball players could play better baseball if they learned and practiced a few basic ideas from psychology. He wasn't the first, really, but he was, because there was a guy, back in the 30s that was studying Babe Ruth, but he was the first to popularize the idea and to make it more broadly applicable. He wrote, self-discipline is a form of freedom, freedom from laziness and lethargy, freedom from expectations and demands of others, freedom from weakness and fear and doubt. Self-discipline allows a pitcher to feel his individuality, his inner strength, and his talent. He is a master of, rather than a slave to, his thoughts and emotions. And I found that Harvey Dorfman guy because I found a quote by retired baseball player and now highly regarded quality control coach for the Oakland A's, Mark Kotsay. Mark wrote, Dorfman asked me what I was trying to do in a particular batting situation. I told him I was trying to hit the ball so the guy on the base could make it home, that I felt responsible for getting him in. Dorfman said, that's not the thing. He reminded me that all I could control was trying to have a quality at bat. So that's what I'm doing now, just trying to relax and hit the ball best I can. Most major sports teams these days have team psychologists because those that do tend to do well. They tend to win. So what's the function of these psychologists? It's to keep the players focused on what is within their control and not to be pulled off by what other people do or say or think. Is this weird or what, right? We, just like the baseball players, the basketball players, the football players, have in our ability our control, where we choose to put our focus and our intention. Raymond Holliwell wrote in Working with the Law, some people, unwise to nature's method, set up a different method. When they meet an obstacle, they stop their progress to collect their forces and put up a fight to remove it. This resistance they set up causes friction. Friction causes irritation and inflammation. For this reason, many people's lives are hard and exacting. The waste of human energy is appalling. People in every walk of life are breaking down and wearing out like obsolete machinery. It is not the movement of the machine that wears it out, it's friction. Friction is opposition. Friction is resistance. If we go through life fighting, opposing, resisting, and arguing, we are bound to meet many obstacles and likely become so occupied fighting that we lose sight of our real objective. If we're always getting steeled for the next opposition or trouble, we can expect plenty of it. He goes on, if we strive to minimize or make little of the obstacle and keep our minds on the objective or the desire we set out to gain, if we persevere, we ultimately reach our goal. This is hard, right? Because there's so much that looks quite wrong with the world at the moment. But if we're fighting it, we're actually in our own way. If we're fighting it, we're in our own way. How do we get clear enough to see and support that vision, that goal that we wish to have? There's a story Raymond Holliwell tells as well. A woman running a boarding house came to see him. She was complaining. Her boarding house was full of miserable, quarrelsome, critical people who never paid rent on time. And so she responded in kind by being miserable, quarrelsome, critical, grumpy, nasty, yucky. She asked Holliwell for help, realizing if she didn't change something, she was going to be foreclosed on for non-payment of the mortgage. He told her to change her behavior towards her boarders, to greet them with a smile, to treat them kindly, and to do her best to mean it. Since her boarders had never been treated kindly by her before, they weren't sure what to make of it. In fact, they were fairly sure she'd lost her mind or that it would quit and she'd go back to normal soon. But as she persisted in her new behavior, as she continued this practice, she started actually meaning it. She started enjoying them. She became changed within herself. She saw her boarders with different eyes, in different light. Instead of thinking of them as liars and cheats, she saw the good in them and grew to like them even more. That treatment was reciprocated. In fact, she never had another vacancy in her boarding house. There were always people lined up to keep it full because it was such a fine place to live. This is not an easy practice to do. In fact, it's quite challenging at times, but it is possible. We have to remember to act as observers in our own lives and not to live at the effect of our emotions and our primitive reptilian brains. You remember that our reptilian brain only has 3 choices, and they're all defensive: fight, flight, or freeze. It can do nothing else. It doesn't know. Defensively, those are our choices, but we are not trapped in living defensively. From the spiritual thought today, from Dr. Holmes, from Words That Heal Today, this is big, right? Jesus said very little about the negative conditions he wished to change. He took an opposite position. Instead of telling God how sick and poor people were, how famished and lonely they were, he affirmed the opposite. He told the lame to walk, the blind to see, the dumb to speak, and the deaf to hear. He commanded the waves to be still, even while they were turbulently tossing him around. He was calm in the midst of the storm. So what was he doing when he did that? He wasn't making them do anything. He was seeing them as though they were already whole, as though they were already healed. We can do that ourselves, just like the lady with the bottle of holy water, just like the woman with the boarding house. If we see people, most of the time they will rise to the occasion. And it's a hard thing to see someone as a friend when they look like a frenemy or worse. And yet that is our task. That is our challenge, to be able to see everyone in our world with eyes of love and not resist the story that we're running about what bad people they are. We have to make space and let people be positive. See them positively and let them be a positive experience. So I want to close with a much more human experience that Dr. Howard Thurman wrote in his book, For the Inward Journey. Despite the dullness and the barrenness of the days that pass, if I search with due diligence, I can always find a deposit left by some former radiance. But I had forgotten. At the time, it was full-orbed, glorious and resplendent. I was sure that I would never forget. In the moment of its fullness, I was sure it would illumine my path for all the rest of my journey. I had forgotten how easy it is to forget. There was no intent to betray what seemed so sure at the time. My response was whole, clean, and authentic. But little by little, there crept into my life the dust and grit of the journey. Details, lower level demands, all kinds of cross currents. Nothing momentous, nothing overwhelming, nothing flagrant, just wear and tear, friction. If there had been some direct challenge, a clear-cut issue, I would have fought it to the end and beyond. In the quietness of this place, surrounded by the all-pervading presence of God, my heart whispers, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve. And in fair weather or in foul, in good times or tempests, in the days when the darkness and the foes are nameless or familiar, I may not forget that to which my life is committed. Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve. It's quite a chore, right? How do we look at the world and see what we're looking at and engage with people in a positive way and see them in the light that they are and see ourselves in the light that we are and not get trapped and stuck in some old story just because, or what we read in some broadcast. We have that. It is in our skill set. It is in our capability. We just have to practice. And remember and practice. Do that. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So I'm going to roll on into the prayer now. So if something popped up in your mind, some sticky place, some point of friction, and you're ready to let it go, you're ready to release it and allow the fluid flow of life to express through you. Hold that in your mind. Consider what it will take to let it go and let it be while I speak the words. In this moment of now, in this moment of high resolve, when I remember and choose to direct my gaze and my consciousness towards that higher presence that I know lives in me, as me, through me, and in, as, and through each beloved on this call. I remember moment by moment, I get to choose, I get to decide how to engage. I get to decide how to see the world and all inhabitants therein. And I get to decide how to be. And so I choose again and again and again to serve love, to serve peace, to serve harmony, to serve wholeness, to remember inclusion, to remember oneness and unity, to remember this great yes that enlivens everyone. So even though there will be other sticky spots, other places when I forget, I take a step back and I remember and I remind myself again and again and again, however many times it takes. Water breaks down all the rocks. Love heals all. Harmony includes all. There is space enough for all beings in this thing called life. And so I remember this goodness. I remember this wholeness. I remember this expansion. And I breathe into it as best I can at every opportunity. And I feel grateful for this opportunity, this chance to remember and practice. And I let it be. And so it is.